I never thought I'd be telling this story. Never imagined that my life would become this complicated mess of emotions, responsibilities, and impossible choices. My name is Gene Park, and 6 months ago, I was just another financial analyst at Williams Enterprises. Another Korean immigrant working twice as hard to prove myself half as worthy in America. The fact that women in the office constantly found excuses to drop by my desk didn't make things easier. In Korea, my features would be ordinary. Here in Manhattan, they made me exotic. That was before the company gala that changed everything. Before those 5 words that shattered my carefully constructed world into 1,000 jagged pieces. I'm pregnant. It's yours. How does a man react when one of the most powerful women in America, his direct superior, a tech billionaire whose name appears regularly on Forbes lists, tells him that? How was I supposed to respond when Maya Williams, the woman whose approval I'd been desperately seeking professionally, revealed that our one night had consequences neither of us had planned for? If you want to see how an attractive Korean immigrant like me navigates an extraordinary situation with one of America's most powerful black businesswomen, comment woman power and hit the like button. Stay until the end. This story might just change how you view responsibility, sacrifice, and unexpected love. The day started like any other. Quarterly reports due, projections to finalize. The steady hum of anxiety that's been my constant companion since immigrating to America 5 years ago. I wasn't raised to show weakness, but that doesn't mean I don't feel it, crushing me from the inside while I maintain a perfect exterior. The weight of family expectations rested heavily on my shoulders. My mother's voice constantly echoed in my head. We sacrificed everything for you to succeed in America. Don't waste this opportunity. As if I needed the reminder when every rent check I wrote, every dollar I sent home, every visa renewal application was already a testament to that pressure. Her assistant called at 2:17 p.m. Ms. Williams wanted to see me in her office immediately. No explanation, no context, just the summons that made every employee's heart rate spike. I thought I was being fired. 6 months at the company and already I'd be packing my desk into a cardboard box. Another failure, another disappointment. My mother's sacrifices wasted. Again, the disgrace of returning to Seoul with nothing to show for my American dream except another rejection to add to my collection. The thought of calling home to explain made my stomach clench with a familiar dread I'd been fighting since childhood. The elevator ride to the executive floor was the longest 40 seconds of my life. Each floor number lighting up felt like another nail in my professional coffin. 27, 28, 29. Each electronic ding counting down to my execution. The executive offices occupied the entire 52nd floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views that most people only see in movies. It's the kind of luxury that reminds you exactly where you stand in the hierarchy. Exactly how far you have to fall. The kind of luxury that makes you instantly aware of your ill-fitting suit from the outlet mall and the scuffed shoes you haven't had time to replace. I can still remember the weight of her stare when I entered. Maya Williams doesn't fidget, doesn't show nervousness, doesn't betray emotion in negotiations worth billions. I'd seen footage of her calmly dismantling hostile takeover attempts with the same emotional investment most people show when ordering coffee. Yet there she was, pacing behind her desk. Those designer glasses she wears for board meetings discarded carelessly on imported marble. Her fingers tapping an irregular rhythm against her thigh. A nervous tell I'd never witnessed before. Close the door, Gene. That's when I knew. Not that I was being fired, but that something monumental was happening. In 6 months, she'd never used my first name. I was always Mr. Park or simply Park. When she was displeased with my work, the familiarity of Gene in her mouth was so unexpected I nearly forgot to breathe. When she said those words, "I'm pregnant. It's yours," I felt the floor vanish beneath me. The city sprawled beyond the windows blurred into meaningless shapes. All I could see was her face, uncommonly vulnerable, stripped of the confident mask she wore for shareholders and employees. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears, drowning out the ambient sounds of the office beyond the closed door. 2 months ago, the company retreat at Napa Valley. The acquisition deal we'd closed after 18 hours of nonstop negotiations. The celebration afterward. The bottle of rare wine she'd shared with only me, acknowledging my contribution when no one else had. You saw the pattern in their quarterly statements that everyone else missed, she'd said, pouring me another glass. That's the difference between an analyst and a strategist. The sunrise we watched from her private villa, pretending we were just colleagues appreciating a beautiful view until we weren't pretending anymore. The way she'd whispered my name against my skin, so different from the professional distance she maintained in the office. The morning after, we agreed it was a mistake. Not because it wasn't good, it was transcendent in ways I'm still processing. But because the power dynamic was impossible. Because my visa status was complicated. Because she built an empire by never showing vulnerability. Because I was supporting my mother and sister back in Seoul and couldn't risk everything on something so reckless. We shook hands. Literally shook hands like business partners concluding a transaction, and promised to never mention it again. I returned to my room, packed my bag, and spent the 6-hour flight back to New York convincing myself it had never happened. My first thought wasn't about the baby. It wasn't about my responsibilities or what my mother would say or how this would affect my career. My first thought was about her. How exhausted she looked beneath her perfect makeup, how her shoulders carried a tension I'd never seen before, how her eyes held a question she was too proud to ask directly. For a woman who commanded boardrooms with unwavering confidence, this uncertainty seemed fundamentally wrong, like witnessing gravity suddenly reverse. How far along? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Too calm, too detached. Inside, I was screaming. Inside, I was calculating dates and probabilities and the statistical failure rate of contraceptives. Inside, I was thinking about visa regulations and paternity laws and whether having an American child would affect my immigration status. Inside, I was remembering every conversation with my mother about bringing honor to our family name, about making her sacrifices worthwhile. 10 weeks. I found out last Thursday. I've seen 2 different doctors to confirm. Her voice was steady but distant, as if she were briefing me on a problematic investment rather than a life-altering personal development. I waited to tell you until I was certain, until I'd made decisions about how to proceed. What do you need from me? Another detached question when what I wanted to ask was, are you okay? Are you scared? Am I allowed to be terrified too? Are we keeping it? What happens to us now? What happens to me if this becomes public knowledge? Nothing. I'm telling you because you deserve to know, but I don't expect anything. I'm financially secure. I have excellent health care. I can handle this independently. She straightened papers on her desk that didn't need straightening. I understand this is unexpected. That you have your own life, your own obligations. I'm not looking to complicate those. The anger hit me then. Not at her, at the situation, at the implication, at myself. At the assumption that I would want to be dismissed so easily from something so monumental. At the realization that she'd spent days making plans that included my absence before even telling me I was going to be a father. You think I'd walk away? You think I'm the kind of man who'd abandon his child? My voice rose despite my best efforts to maintain composure. The hurt and indignation surprised even me with their intensity. Growing up without a father leaves scars invisible to everyone but those closest to you. My mother never spoke ill of the man who left us when I was 4. She simply filled both roles, working 3 jobs, sacrificing her own dreams so I could chase mine in America. I watched her hands grow calloused from working in her small restaurant. Watched her fall asleep at our kitchen table, still wearing her apron, exhausted from 16-hour days. Watched her decline medical care she couldn't afford while insisting I attend the best schools she could manage. I've spent a lifetime listening to the silence where a father's voice should have been. 28 years of birthday cards signed with only one name. 28 years of showing up to parent-teacher conferences alone, of learning to tie a tie from YouTube videos, of answering he left when friends asked about my dad until I finally stopped explaining altogether. I vowed I would never be like him. Never walk away from responsibility. Never leave a child wondering why they weren't enough to make their father stay. Never have another human being associate my absence with their worth. This isn't about your character, Jean. It's about practicality. You're an immigrant on a work visa. I'm your direct superior. There are a dozen HR violations in that sentence alone. Maya crossed her arms, creating another barrier between us. Not to mention the optics for the company, the board's reaction, the media scrutiny if this becomes public. A black female CEO pregnant by her Korean employee isn't exactly a narrative that stays quiet. She was right, of course. Always practical. Always 3 steps ahead. But there are moments when practicality fails, when the messy reality of human emotion crashes through every carefully constructed barrier. When spreadsheets and strategic planning and risk assessment can't account for the simple, devastating truth that actions have consequences that transcend professional considerations. I don't care about HR violations or visa complications or what anyone might say. There's a child coming. My child. Our child. I'm not walking away. I planted my hands on her desk, leaning forward to emphasize each word. I don't know exactly how we navigate this, but we figure it out. Together. Because I am not becoming another statistic. Another absent father. Another man who prioritized convenience over responsibility. The silence that followed felt weighted with possibilities. Some terrifying. Some I hadn't allowed myself to consider. Through the glass walls, I could see the corporate machine continuing its relentless pace. Assistants hurrying between offices. Executives gesturing emphatically during conference calls. Junior analysts hunched over computer screens. None of them aware that in this soundproofed office, my entire existence was being redefined. I have an appointment next week, she said finally. First trimester screening. Ultrasound. If you want to attend, text me the details. I'll be there. If you're enjoying this story, comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. And remember, sometimes life's most unexpected turns lead to our greatest destinations. Though when you're in the middle of the storm, it's impossible to see anything but chaos. The ultrasound appointment arrived faster than I was prepared for. I spent the intervening days in a fog of anxiety and research, reading everything I could find about pregnancy, family law, corporate policies on relationships between executives and subordinates. None of it provided answers to the questions that kept me awake at night. None of it told me how to be a father to a child who would be born into 2 entirely different worlds. My Korean heritage and struggle, Maya's Black American success and privilege. None of it explained how to navigate being forever tied to a woman so far above my station that under normal circumstances, I wouldn't even be allowed to ride in the same elevator. I read about fetal development until my eyes burned. Learned that at 10 weeks the baby was the size of a kumquat. That it had fingers and toes and a functioning circulatory system. That its heart had been beating since before either of us knew it existed. I found myself touching my own wrist sometimes, feeling my pulse and imagining that tiny heartbeats synchronized with mine somehow across time and space. The clinic was discreet, expensive, the kind with no visible signage and a private elevator. The kind where celebrities and politicians go to receive medical care away from prying eyes and paparazzi lenses. Everything about it screamed exclusivity. The marble floors gleaming with weekly polish. The reception area more reminiscent of a luxury hotel lobby than a waiting room. The staff moving with practiced discretion, never betraying recognition even when attending to someone whose face appeared on magazine covers. Everything about it reminded me that I didn't belong in Maya's world. She was already there when I arrived, sitting perfectly composed in a corner chair, scrolling through emails on her phone as if this were just another business meeting. She wore a tailored pantsuit that revealed nothing of the changes happening inside her body. Her expression remained neutral when I approached, but I noticed her hand trembling slightly as she put away her phone. "You came," she said, and I detected genuine surprise in her voice. I said I would. I took the seat beside her, maintaining a professional distance despite the intimacy of the situation. I meant it. We sat in uncomfortable silence until a nurse called her name. Maya Williams. Not Ms. Williams. Not the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company. Just Maya Williams. Another expectant mother in a clinic full of them. The democratic nature of pregnancy struck me then, how it reduced everyone to the same fundamental human experience regardless of wealth or status or power. The exam room was warmer than I expected, designed to put patients at ease with soft lighting and comfortable furnishings. The ultrasound machine looked like something from a science fiction film, sleek, expensive, intimidating in its medical significance. Maya changed into a gown behind a privacy screen while I studied the developmental charts on the wall, trying to absorb information about a process I'd never expected to be personally invested in. Then the ultrasound began, and suddenly none of that mattered. On the screen appeared a grainy image, small, bean-shaped, but undeniably alive. A flickering light that the doctor identified as a heartbeat. A spine curved like a question mark. The suggestion of limbs moving in the amniotic fluid. Evidence of existence that transcended the sterile medical terminology I'd been studying. "There's your baby," the doctor said warmly, measuring exactly right for 10 weeks. Strong heartbeat at 160 beats per minute. Everything looks perfectly normal. "Your baby, not Sumin's baby, not my baby, our baby." The collective possessive struck me with physical force. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This wasn't a problem to solve or a situation to manage. This was a person with my DNA and Maya's, a person who would someday walk through the world carrying pieces of both of us, regardless of whether we were together or apart. The doctor asked if we wanted to hear the heartbeat. Maya nodded, and suddenly the room filled with a rapid whooshing sound, like horses galloping, fast and determined. The sound of life asserting itself against all odds and complications. The sound of continuation. A future. I don't cry. Haven't since I left Korea. Haven't since the day at the airport when my mother pressed her palm against my cheek and told me to make her proud. And I promised I wouldn't return until I had something worthy to show for my time away. I learned early that men in my culture don't show that kind of weakness. That tears are a luxury afforded to those with less responsibility, less expectation. But in that sterile exam room, watching a screen showing a child I hadn't planned for, listening to a heartbeat I hadn't known existed until 2 weeks ago, something broke inside me. Some carefully constructed wall between who I pretended to be and who I actually was collapsed under the weight of unexpected emotion. I felt wetness on my cheeks and couldn't summon the will to be embarrassed by it. I felt Maya's hand find mine, squeeze once, a silent acknowledgement of our shared overwhelm. Her fingers were cool against my skin, her grip stronger than I expected. For that moment, we weren't CEO and employee, weren't divided by status or background or professional hierarchy. We were just two people facing an impossible situation together, connected by the visual evidence of our shared responsibility flickering on the screen before us. "I wasn't sure until this moment," she whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. "If I wanted this, if I could do this. And now." She looked at me, really looked at me, with none of the CEO mask she typically wore. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, her expression open in a way I'd never witnessed before. For the first time since I'd known her, Maya Williams wasn't calculating her next move or considering strategic implications. She was simply present, simply human. Now I can't imagine anything else. What followed were weeks of careful negotiation. Not about the pregnancy itself, but about how we would navigate our impossible situation. Transfer to a different department to remove the direct reporting relationship. Non-disclosure agreements drafted by lawyers who asked no questions but whose eyes reflected their assumptions. Legal consultations about custody arrangements. Clinical discussions about logistics that never addressed the growing tension between us. Every interaction felt like a chess match. Every decision loaded with subtext and implication. We created spreadsheets for prenatal appointments and delivery plans. Established protocols for how we would communicate about the pregnancy while maintaining professional distance at work. Drafted contingency plans for various scenarios that might expose our situation before we were ready to announce it. All without ever discussing what we actually felt about each other, about the night that had created this situation, about the possibility that this wasn't just a practical problem to solve but a profound human connection we were both pretending to ignore. I didn't tell my mother immediately. How could I explain that I'd impregnated my American billionaire boss during a company retreat? That my child would be born into privilege I couldn't comprehend while I still sent money home to keep our family restaurant afloat? That this child would be half black, half Korean, a combination my traditional mother had never encountered? That every carefully laid plan I'd constructed was now being rewritten around a person who didn't exist yet? When I finally gathered the courage to call her, the conversation went nothing like I'd imagined. I'd rehearsed explanations and apologies and reassurances, prepared for disappointment and recrimination, prepared to defend Maya against whatever prejudices might surface, prepared to stand my ground about my involvement regardless of cultural expectations. Yama, I need to tell you something important. I heard her inhale sharply, preparing for bad news. In immigrant families, important announcements are rarely positive. Success is expected. Only failure merits special attention. I'm going to be a father. The silence stretched so long I checked to see if the call had dropped. Checked the time difference again to confirm I hadn't woken her in the middle of the night, though I'd calculated it carefully before dialing. Iyama? Who is she? 3 words, loaded with unspoken questions. Is she Korean? Is she suitable? Will she respect our traditions? Will she look down on our family? Will she understand the importance of language and culture and history? Will she know how to make proper kimchi or celebrate Chuseok correctly? Will she value the things we value? Her name is Maya Williams. She's my boss. Another silence, this one heavy with recalculation. The CEO? The black woman who built that technology empire? That boss. Of course my mother knew who Maya Williams was. Her face appeared regularly in business magazines, on television, at economic forums. She was the golden child of American enterprise, brilliant, unmarried, fiercely private about her personal life. Even in Seoul, her accomplishments had made headlines. The first black woman to take a tech company public before age 30. The architect behind software that revolutionized global finance. The self-made billionaire who refused acquisition offers from tech giants 3 times her company's age. Yes, that boss. I waited for the explosion, for the disappointment, for the lecture about responsibility and propriety and bringing shame to our family, for the cultural objections I'd steeled myself against, for questions about what this meant for my professional future, my visa status, my ability to continue supporting them. Instead, I heard a soft exhale. Gina, she said, using the childhood endearment she'd abandoned when I turned 18. Are you in love with her? The question blindsided me. Love? I hadn't allowed myself to consider it. Not with Maya. Not with the mother of my child. Not with a woman who could buy and sell my entire existence without noticing the expense. Not with someone whose life existed in a stratosphere so far removed from mine that the very idea seemed absurd. Traction, yes. Respect, certainly. But love? It's complicated, Iyama. Love always is. But a child deserves parents who at least tried to love each other. My mother's wisdom, as always, cut through my defenses. She who had raised children alone, who had sacrificed everything for us, was telling me to consider not just duty but possibility. Not just responsibility but connection. The permission in her voice to want more than I thought I deserved left me speechless. At work, rumors started despite our discretion. My sudden transfer to international finance raised eyebrows. The whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the break room. The speculative glances when Maya and I happened to be in the same meeting. Her cleared afternoon calendar every Wednesday, for prenatal appointments, generated speculation among her executive team. The way we carefully avoided each other in public while exchanging private messages about the pregnancy created an obvious tension others could sense if not name. James from accounting stopped me in the hallway, his expression too casual to be genuine. Park, heard you've been spending time at the Williams estate, working on a special project. The emphasis he placed on special project made his insinuation clear. Sarah from HR suddenly found reasons to review my personnel file. Just updating our records, she explained with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. making sure your visa sponsorship is in order. Then came the board meeting where everything changed. 12 weeks into the pregnancy, still not publicly acknowledged, Maya was presenting quarterly projections when I noticed something shift in her demeanor. A hesitation in her normally flawless delivery. A slight tremor in the hand holding her presentation remote. A bead of sweat at her temple despite the aggressively air-conditioned boardroom. I was there only as support staff, present to provide specific data if questioned, expected to remain invisible otherwise. Seated against the wall with other analysts, not at the main table with executives and board members. But I watched her with the heightened awareness of someone who had come to know her rhythms and tells, who had spent weeks monitoring her for signs of pregnancy complications, who had learned to distinguish between her normal intensity and actual distress. When she swayed slightly, gripping the edge of the podium, I was already moving toward her. Protocol and propriety abandoned in the face of physical distress. "Ms. Williams needs a break," I announced to the stunned room. "We'll resume in 15 minutes. The boardroom erupted in confused murmurs. Board members exchanging glances loaded with speculation. Executive team members frozen in uncertainty, unsure whether to follow their CEO or continue the meeting without her. No one moved to help her except me, either from shock or calculation, I couldn't tell. I escorted Maya into her private office adjacent to the conference room, one hand at the small of her back, the other holding her elbow to steady her. As soon as the door closed behind us, she collapsed into her chair, head in her hands. "I'm fine," she insisted, though clearly she wasn't. "Just got dizzy for a moment. Blood pressure drop. The doctor mentioned this might happen. You're not fine. You're pushing yourself too hard. You need to rest. I have a company to run, Jean. I can't just take a nap when I feel tired." Her voice carried the sharp edge I recognized as fear disguised as irritation. "The Morrison acquisition won't wait because I'm having a bad day." The frustration boiled over then. Weeks of carefully maintained distance, of clinical discussions about the baby with no acknowledgement of the tension between us, of pretending we were nothing more than biological contributors to a shared DNA project. "This isn't about the company. This is about our child. This is about you risking your health because you're too stubborn to show any vulnerability." The words escaped before I could filter them, my voice rising with each sentence. "You think those people in there care about you? They care about quarterly results and stock options. They care about what you can do for them. None of them moved to help you just now. Not one." I braced for the explosion, for the reminder that I had overstepped my boundaries, for the termination notice, for the cold dismissal that would end my career and possibly my visa status, for the Maya Williams I'd seen reduce executives to stammering apologies with a single raised eyebrow. Instead, she started to cry. In 6 months of working directly under her, I'd never seen Maya display even a hint of emotional fragility. She was steel-wrapped in designer suits, unbending and unbreakable. The woman who famously told a reporter that tears are a luxury for those who don't have empires to build. Yet here she was, tears streaming down her face, hands pressed protectively over her still flat stomach. "I'm scared, Jean," she whispered. "I'm terrified. I built this company from nothing. Fought against every stereotype about black women in American business, about what a successful woman should sacrifice. I worked while men slept, sacrificed everything personal for this professional success. And now you're having a baby. It doesn't erase everything you've built." I knelt beside her chair, offering a tissue from the box on her desk. "It just means you're building something else too, doesn't it? The board is already questioning my commitment, suggesting I might want to step back during this special time. They see pregnancy as weakness, as proof I'm just a woman after all, ruled by biology rather than ambition." Her laugh was bitter, edged with a rage I understood all too well. Richardson actually had the audacity to suggest that hormonal fluctuations might cloud my judgment during critical negotiations, as if I haven't been making billion-dollar decisions while menstruating for the past 15 years. The injustice of it burned in my chest. The same board members who celebrated when male executives became fathers, handing out cigars and congratulations for continuing their bloodlines, saw Maya's pregnancy as a liability, as evidence she was less committed, less capable, less worthy of her position. It was the same double standard I'd watched my mother navigate in smaller ways throughout my childhood. The same impossible expectations placed on women who dared to be both professionally accomplished and personally fulfilled. If you believe in standing by those you love when it matters most, double tap that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most difficult chapters. Though at this point in our story, I wasn't sure if we were writing a tragedy or a romance. Weeks later, the doctor confirmed what we'd feared. Maya's blood pressure was dangerously elevated. Preeclampsia risk. She needed bed rest, reduced stress, complete delegation of responsibilities. Everything the board had been pushing for since learning about the pregnancy. 20 years, Jean. I've spent 20 years building this company, fighting for every contract, every investor, every market expansion. Do you have any idea what it's like for a black woman in American business? The constant undermining? The assumption that I got here through affirmative action rather than brilliance? The endless need to be twice as prepared, twice as polished, twice as perfect just to be considered half as competent. Maya paced her bedroom, ignoring the doctor's instructions to rest. I've spent my entire adult life proving I deserve my success, and now my body is betraying me exactly the way they all predicted it would. I couldn't. My own struggles as a Korean man in America were real. Navigating between being fetishized for my appearance and being dismissed for my accent. But they weren't the same as what she'd faced. The intersection of race and gender created barriers I could theoretically understand but never truly experience. The best I could offer was presence, witness, support without false claims of perfect empathy. What happens if you don't rest? If you push through like you always have? I kept my voice deliberately calm, knowing emotion would only strengthen her resistance. Her hand went to her stomach, a protective gesture that seemed instinctive rather than calculated. Potential complications, risk of premature delivery. In severe cases. She couldn't finish the sentence, but I'd read enough to fill in the blanks. Seizures, organ damage, death in worst-case scenarios. Then there's no choice, I said simply. The company will survive a few months of adjusted leadership. A child needs its mother alive and well. I moved into her guest house, a small residence that was 3 times the size of my apartment, with a kitchen better equipped than most restaurants. The transition happened with minimal explanation to colleagues. Maya's executive assistant drafted a memo about a special financial project requiring close collaboration. HR processed paperwork that technically made me report to the CFO rather than directly to Maya. The board was informed that Maya would be working remotely due to health considerations that were protected by medical privacy laws. Our days fell into rhythm. Mornings, I'd bring her breakfast and medication. We'd review overnight communications, prioritize what truly needed her attention. Afternoons, I'd work from the guest house while she rested, joining conference calls on her behalf when necessary. Evenings, we'd eat dinner together, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes engaged in debates about business strategy or cultural differences or what to name the child growing between us. One evening, she asked about my family. So I told her everything, about my mother who ran a small Korean restaurant in Seoul, who never complained even when her hands cracked and bled from constant work. About my sister who gave up her own dreams to keep the family business running when our mother's health began failing. About leaving Korea for America with nothing but excellent grades and fierce determination. About the casual racism I'd encountered in classrooms and boardrooms alike. About learning to make myself smaller, less threatening, more palatable to American sensibilities while still maintaining enough of my identity to recognize myself in the mirror. I wasn't born wealthy, she said quietly after I finished. My parents worked in Detroit factories. My father on the line at Ford, my mother cleaning office buildings at night. Working class people who saved every penny for my education. This surprised me. the Williams empire she controlled, I'd assumed a more privileged background. The way she moved through elite spaces with such confidence suggested someone born to wealth rather than someone who had clawed her way into it. Then how? I built it. From nothing. Started coding in high school. Got a scholarship to MIT. Started a software company from my dorm room. Designed programs for financial institutions. Reinvested every profit. Took risks my competitors thought were insane. I became who I am through work and strategy and sacrifice. Not inheritance. The revelation shifted something fundamental in my understanding of her. Not an heiress playing at corporate leadership, but a self-made woman who had fought for every achievement. Not so different from my mother in determination, though vastly different in opportunity and outcome. Someone who understood struggle, who recognized the particular hunger that comes from knowing nothing will be handed to you, who had built armor against a world designed to exclude her. That night, we video called my mother together. I watched these two formidable women. One who had sacrificed everything for her children. One who had sacrificed a personal life for professional success. Evaluate each other carefully through the digital divide. Two women from entirely different worlds, connected now by the child we'd created. By the end of the call, something unexpected had happened. These women had found common ground in their shared experience of fighting systems designed to limit them, of making impossible choices, of sacrificing certain dreams to pursue others. My mother taught Maya how to say grandmother in Korean. Maya promised to send my mother books about Black American history so she could understand the heritage her grandchild would share. Then came the day everything changed. Week 28. The third trimester. Maya had been granted permission to attend one in-person board meeting to address escalating concerns about the company's direction in her partial absence. I would accompany her as her financial consultant, remain nearby in case she needed assistance. Board member Richardson immediately questioned decisions made during Maya's restricted work period, implied that leadership had grown distracted, suggested that perhaps a more traditional arrangement would better serve the company's interests during this transitional time. The euphemisms weren't subtle. The implication that pregnancy had compromised her judgment was clear to everyone in the room. I watched Maya maintain perfect composure while this mediocre man who had inherited his position through family connections, questioned her competence because she dared to prioritize her health while pregnant. Watched her methodically dismantle his concerns with data and projections. Watched her demonstrate more strategic insight from bed rest than he'd shown in 5 years of board membership. When she paused mid-sentence, swaying slightly, I was already moving toward her. Protocol and propriety abandoned in the face of physical distress. Ms. Williams needs medical attention immediately, I announced, supporting her as she gripped the conference table. Call an ambulance. The room erupted in confused concern. Richardson suggesting it was probably just female problems, and the meeting could continue after a brief recess. That's when I lost the careful control I'd maintained for months. The professional distance, the respect for hierarchy, the deference to authority that had been beaten into me as a Korean man trying to succeed in America. This woman, I said, my voice cold with fury, has built this company from nothing into a global enterprise worth billions. She has worked through this pregnancy despite medical advice to rest completely. She has maintained growth metrics while operating at reduced capacity because she refuses to let her health challenges impact corporate performance. I looked directly at Richardson, letting him see every ounce of contempt I felt. And she has done all this while carrying my child, yes, my child, who represents not a distraction but the future. If you think her dedication to this company is compromised by pregnancy, you understand nothing about dedication, nothing about leadership, and certainly nothing about Maya Williams. In that moment, I knew my career at Williams Enterprises was over. Knew my visa status was potentially compromised. Knew I had burned every bridge I'd carefully constructed over the past year. And I didn't care, because Maya was gripping my arm with frightening intensity, her face pale with pain, whispering, "Something's wrong. The baby." The hospital was chaos, and waiting and terror compressed into hours that felt like years. Premature labor, the doctors said. Placental issues. Concern about the baby's oxygen levels. Words like emergency C-section and NICU being thrown around with clinical detachment, while my entire world narrowed to the sound of Maya's heartbeat on the monitor and the increasingly erratic pattern of our daughter's distress. The technical terms washed over me while one fact remained crystal clear. Both Maya and our daughter were in danger. Both could be lost in the sterile efficiency of an operating room while I waited helplessly outside, barred from entry by medical protocols and the fact that legally, I was nothing to Maya. Not husband, not partner, just the father of her child, a designation that carried no rights in this critical moment. When they finally left us alone, Maya looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. The hospital gown replacing designer clothes, her face stripped of makeup, for lines connecting her to machines monitoring both her and our child. "You called me your child at the board meeting," she said quietly. "In front of everyone. Of all the things to focus on in this moment of medical crisis, that was what she chose. I'm sorry if that complicates things professionally. I wasn't thinking about corporate policy or public relations. I was just... No one has ever defended me like that before." Her voice caught. "No one has ever put me before the company, before appearances, before propriety." I moved closer, careful of the 4 lines, and took her hand. "The company is what you do, not who you are. And who you are matters more to me than what you do." Tears filled her eyes, tears she would have ruthlessly suppressed in any other context but allowed now, in this private moment of vulnerability. "I think I'm in love with you," she whispered, "and it terrifies me more than anything that's happened today. More than the medical emerge, or the board's reaction, or the possibility of premature delivery." The words hit me with physical force, the confession I'd stopped allowing myself to hope for after weeks of careful coexistence. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I've never needed anyone before. Never allowed myself to need anyone. And now I need you, not just for practical support during this pregnancy, but emotionally, fundamentally. I need your steady presence and your quiet strength and your absolute certainty that family comes before everything else." I brought her hand to my lips, kissed the knuckles that had signed billion-dollar contracts and cradled ultrasound pictures with equal care. "I've been in love with you since you cried in your office and admitted you were scared," I confessed. "Maybe before that. Maybe since Napa Valley when you shared that rare wine and watched the sunrise with me and were just Maya, not C.O. Williams. Thank you for following Jean and Maya's journey. If their story touched your heart, subscribe for more narratives that remind us how love transcends boundaries of culture, class, and circumstance. Leave a comment sharing an unexpected turn that changed your life, because sometimes our greatest blessings arrive in packages we never anticipated. Our daughter was born 3 weeks later, small but fierce, with her mother's determined expression and, the nurses claimed, my patient temperament. We named her Hannah Williams Park, honoring both our heritages, both our families, both our journeys. A beautiful Black and Korean child who would navigate multiple worlds just as her parents had. My mother flew to America immediately, setting aside her pride and independence because some things matter more than appearances. The sight of her holding her granddaughter, speaking soft Korean endearments while Maya's parents taught her African-American lullabies, healed something broken in all of us. 6 months after Hannah's birth, Maya stood at a company-wide meeting, our daughter in her arms, and announced changes that shocked corporate America but positioned Williams Enterprises as a progressive leader in work-life integration. "My greatest asset is not my business acumen or my strategic vision," she told the assembled employees. "It's my family, the daughter who reminds me why building a sustainable future matters, and the man who taught me that success without connection is no success at all." 1 year after that fateful board meeting where I'd publicly claimed our child, I stood with Maya at our daughter's first birthday celebration, a beautiful blend of Korean Dole traditions and African-American customs. Hannah wore a colorful silk hanbok my mother had brought from Seoul, while Maya's mother prepared traditional Seoul food dishes passed down through generations. Later that evening, After guests had departed and Hannah slept peacefully in the nursery we'd created together, I asked Maya to marry me, with simple words that acknowledged the dual heritage we were building together. When I built this company, I thought it was the greatest achievement possible, she said quietly. I measured success in acquisitions and market share and profit margins. I was wrong. She turned to face me, this woman who had redefined herself without losing her essence, who had expanded rather than compromised. This us, Hannah, the family we're creating, this is the achievement that matters. And yes, Jean Park, I will marry you, honoring both our paths that somehow, impossibly, led to each other. I once thought my journey to America was about survival, about working harder than everyone else, about proving my worth in systems designed to exclude me, about securing enough financial stability to help my mother and sister. I never imagined it might also lead to love, to family, to belonging not despite my differences but because of them. And I remember those 5 words that shattered my carefully constructed world 18 months ago. I'm pregnant. It's yours. Words that once filled me with terror now fill me with gratitude. Because sometimes life's most unexpected detours lead exactly where you need to go, even when you didn't know you were looking for a destination at all.